This is a walkthrough of how to answer some of the questions about the rich list data we gave you, particularly using pivot tables. So the questions we had were the following. How many rows, how many different years, how many different categories? So how many rows? We can simply Command Shift down arrow and select all the names, and we'll get a count, an automatic count on the bottom right telling us 1,547. So 1,547 rows with information, or 48 if you include the headers, the column names. How many different years? Well, we can do this with in several ways, but one very simple way is simply to create a filter and then look at the filter to see how many things are on offer. So we can see that 2005 through to 2019. So you can count those up and get whatever it is. So let's not have that filter. Let's see if we can do something similar to what we just did, counting the rows. If we count all of these, select all of them rather, we have more calculations here. It's adding them up because it thinks they're numbers rather than years. And it doesn't actually do a count unique. Okay, so one way around this would be to say count unique, only count, so we want all the items here in this column of years, so C2 through to C1548, and this will count each distinct thing. So it will count 2009 once, and then next time it gets to a different year, 2010, it will count that as number 2. So how many different years are there in all of these is the question we're asking, and the answer is 15. Okay, because it goes from 2009 through to 2019. And how did we get 15? Okay, let's have a look at the filter again and just double check that. Create a filter. So how many years did we get? It's 2005. Okay, so there you go. 2005, 6, 7. Which, turn off, remove filter. And so that looks like count unique C2 to C1548 again. There are 15 different years. And how many different categories? Well, here you have exactly the same thing. You can either create a filter and look through the different categories that are offered and count them up like that, or you can do what we remove the filter, and you can do what we just did, which is say equals count unique, same thing, D2 to D1548, and it will say how many different categories are there, counting all these things, just actors once, comedians once. There are 13 different categories in all. Okay, that's our count unique. So that answers the first question. Second question is, which category made the most money, the most total money over the entire period? Okay, so here we want to say, we want to add up how much all the annual earnings for musicians that are listed, like this. And once we've got a sum of all of that, we want to do it for all the athletes. See how much. So the way to do this is with a pivot table, which pivot tables can live in different places depending on your version of Sheets or Excel, but insert or data or tools. So pivot table, new sheet is always a good idea. And here's our pivot table. And the thing we're interested in is categories. So we'll start with rows. And we'll say we want to see these categories, artist, musician, and so on, along the rows. And so now we've created, get rid of the totals, we've created these bins, if you like, into which we can ask the machine to add or calculate or get averages or so on in terms of the categories. We had a very simple question, which was the total money they made over the period. So we need, now that it has these bins, we need to say, right, what are the values we want to put in the bins? we're interested in pay. So let's have pay, please. And it's going to have to do something in order to get all that, those different pays into one number for actors, for example. And what it's done is it's added them up. Okay, so if you look at something small like models 676, it has gone along through all of these, and it has said anytime it runs into model, which isn't very often, let's do a Control F. There we go. So this person made 15 million, and so we'll add that to the 8 million for Heidi Klum and the 5 million for Kate Moss, and this person's 5 million, and so on. And so we know that adding up all the model categories, you get 676 million. Okay, so, but that wasn't the answer to the question. The question was, which category made the most money? Now, we can probably just look at it, but it would be helpful if we could order it, not by category. It's the moment it's ordered by category because alphabetically, we'd like to order it in terms of these figures. And we can say, please order it by pay. And then it will order it from the smallest to the biggest, and we know it's the musicians is the category that over the period got the most money. Which category made the most total money over the last 3 years? Okay, this is actually really straightforward. I'm going to reverse this before we do anything more, descending. So there we go, musicians at the top. So over the last 3 years, same question really, but just limited to the last 3 years. And the easy way to do this is you could add columns so that you get all musicians in their money in 2005, and you could look then at the last 3 years. Here they are, and you could see what was the question. What category made the most total money over the last 3 years, and find which is the biggest. It looks to be this one here. But there is another way to do this, which is not to use columns, which makes things can make things a little bit unwieldy. So is simply to filter. So we want to filter the years. The moment we've got all the years, we just want the last 3. So we're going to get rid of everything in the filter, and just add in 17, 18, 19. And now we're getting exactly what we got before. All the numbers for musicians added up and so on, but just the last 3 years. And so the category that made the most total money over the past 3 years is still musicians. Now these are all total amounts, so the fact that there's lots more musicians probably than there are other categories, something we can check. Right? We can get rid of the filter, and we can say, instead of adding up all these things, could you count how many occurrences there are? And you can see that musicians appear 386 times in this data set. So if we're adding things up simply, rather than getting average, they're the ones that are probably going to come out on top. Which year has the most entries? Okay, so now we can just get rid of all this. Now we're interested in years, right? Those are the bins that we like to do. We like the machine to do some calculating in. So let's have rows, and let's have the years. So here we go, all the different years, and the question is, which has the most entries? So we could put in, essentially we just want to count how many rows occur with 2005, how many rows occur with 2008. So it doesn't really matter what we put in the values. What's important is what we do with them. So let's say we just put in the name of people, and it's doing what we want automatically, which is we want it to count. And count A is count all, so it deals with text and with numbers. And so what it's doing is saying how many rows occur listed for 2005, with 2005 as their year, and the answer is 100. And then some of them, you'll see 2014 occurs 97 times for some reason, and then these 2015 occurs 110 times for some reason. So the year with the most entries is, well, these have all have the most entries, and this has the least. Who makes more on average over the period? An actress or a comedian? Okay, so now we're back looking at, let's just throw everything out again. We are back looking at categories. What do we want to see in our categories? We want to see, so it's over the entire period, so we don't have to filter for years or anything. Who makes more? Okay, we only want, well, we can filter for actress and comedian. Let's do that. It's not essential, but let's just see actresses and comedians. Okay, what is it we want to see? We want to see pay. Now, we want to see not the total pay, because there are possibly more actors, a lot more actresses than comedians, or vice versa. We want to see on average. So if you take all the earnings for actresses divided by the number of actresses, what we get. And the same with comedians. All the earnings added together for the comedians divided by the number of comedians. So we would like to see an average, so that the numbers of one. So actresses make 19 million on average over the period. So those are 19 versus 35. Next question. 2018 and 2019, which category saw an increase in average annual income? Okay, we'll get rid of everything again. And we will see. Let's filter the years so that we only have 2018 and 19. And then let's look at which category. Let's put categories back into the rows. So here we are again with all the different categories. And let's put, now that we've filtered rows, now we've filtered years, there's not that many of them. So why don't we add them in as the columns? So there should only be 2 years now. There are only 2 years. So we've got 2018 and we've got 2019. Great. And the question we have is average annual income. So we're back with what's the value we're interested in? The value we're interested in is pay. We don't want to add it all up by category, we want an average by category. So now we can see that between the 2 years, who saw an increase? There's an increase, and there's an increase, there's an increase, and that's it. So 3 categories. Which year saw the highest annual income on average? Okay, let's remove all of these. Let's remove the columns. So here we are. Oh, except it's by category, which is not what we want. We want it by year, because years are the things we're interested in. So those are our years, and for each year we are getting average pay. And the year with the highest is the last 2 years. And finally, which comedian had the best single year's earnings over the last 5 years? Okay. So let's filter for categories so that we're only looking at comedians. And let's put another filter in for year. So we're filtering 2 things at the same time over the last 5 years. So let's clear everything and take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, let's put the comedians in for the rows. So there they are. Get rid of the total. So what do we have here? We've said before, we've tended to put years in as the rows, or categories in, and now we've put in the rich people. Okay, we've put in all the names except that we've filtered to say we only want names that appear in a comedy category and names that appear in the last 5 years. So there they are. And what are we interested in? Earnings again. So let's put in pay. There we go. Total pay. So that's telling us that Amy made 38 million over the last 5 years. Chris made 57 million over the last 5 years. Dave made 82 million over the last 5 years, and so on. So that's good. It tells us what the picture is over the last 5 years, but it doesn't let us compare individual years. So if we then take years and add it to the columns, now we can see for these 6 comedians, we can always close the pivot table because it's enough to click on it for it to reappear. The pivot table editor, sorry. So let's close the pivot table editor. And there's a grand total, which I don't want. And so now we can compare, for those 5 comedians, their annual earnings over the last 5 years. And we can see that looks like this one, 88. So Kevin Hart in 2016 had the richest year. There we go. So those are the answers to the questions, all done with a pivot table.